thank you for joining us on this episode of Reaching for Research by Students for Students. My name is Jordan Pilch, and I am a senior here at the University of Arizona studying molecular and cellular biology and microbiology. I am also a student affairs public assistant here at the BIO5 Institute. That was almost the correct order. Today we will be welcoming Alex Karnish, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us and telling us a little bit about how you got into research. Do you want to do a brief introduction to yourself?
Oh yeah, so I'm Alex Karnish. I'm a fourth year Ph.D. candidate in Judy Bronstein's lab in ecology and evolutionary biology.
Oh, that's so cool. I didn't know that you were a fourth year Ph.D. student. You're almost done. So close. You got a little bit more?
Almost there. The average is 6 years. I'm hoping to be on my 5.
You're like halfway through though, you know, a little more than halfway through.
I'm done with comps, so I'm the real deal now.
I have no idea what comps are. What are comps?
Oh, so like partway through, at least in my department, you take a comprehensive exam, which is a bunch of written questions to kind of prove that you know what you're talking about and can be a peer with your mentor and advisors. And so you have some written questions that are very long and take months to get done. And then you have a oral presentation you have to give where they just sit you down and they just ask you questions about anything.
That sounds terrifying.
Yeah, it's not fun.
It's not the fun part of, you know,
I enjoy the oral presentation much more than the written though, because at least the oral presentation I could be like spur of the moment, just kind of say stuff, whereas with the written one, I had time to make it perfect. Yeah. So it made it much more nerve-wracking.
Oh, that's actually kind of interesting how the spontaneity makes it a little bit easier to get yourself into the mindset of, as compared to like, okay, I have the time to make this exactly aligned and do the margins in this specific way. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think people can be a little more forgiving too. Yeah. Spur of the moment thing.
Oh yeah, especially when you're in person and talking to somebody, you know? So, that was a bit of a pre-question. The first actual question is, how did you get into your current research position? You said you're working with Dr. Bronstein. How did you start working with her?
Oh, so it's kind of a little long, meandering story.
Tell us the tale.
So in high school, I had some really good teachers that were science teachers that helped me get into biology. When I went to Iowa State University for undergrad, I was in the honors program, and they have a little research program that you can do your second semester of your first year, where they'll put you into labs. And so there I got working with a postdoctoral student who was working with my academic advisor, and then Dr. Halter Rogers arrived my sophomore year, and she was looking for research, or undergraduates to do research in her lab, so I got started in there, working with seed dispersal, and doing some modeling and looking at the effects of how animals eat seeds in fruit and then see how that affects germination after it leaves the animal. So I was doing a big project with that that'll hopefully be published in the next year. That's how long research takes.
Fingers crossed. Look out for it.
Yeah. So from there, I started looking at graduate schools. And what's funny is that Judy Bronstein, my advisor, actually came to Iowa State to give a big talk, and I happened to be in my academic advisor's office at the same time that a faculty member canceled dinner plans that night with Judy, and so he said, hey, you just want to come along? So I got to have this wonderful dinner with Judy and my academic advisor, Brent Danielson, just talking through research and life, and it was really great. And by the end of it, she was kind of like, I think this is how it went. I guess I could ask her, but I think she's pretty much like, when you're looking for grad schools, apply to mine, because we're always looking for good students. Yeah. And so once that started my senior year of undergrad, I applied there and a couple other places and was able to come in.
Yay! That's actually something that, because I'm a senior right now, and I was originally planning on going into grad school for like molecular and cellular biology, microbiology, all that. I ended up deciding not to do that and to go more into like an education route. But when I was looking at the MCB side, I had been given the advice, make sure that if you're applying to a university that you've talked to a professor there ahead of time. Because it's way easier to get into one if you already have a connection there, if you already have somebody that you want to be in the lab with. That's really cool. So what was interesting about Dr. Bronstein's work that you said, not only I had this great dinner experience, but I also want to work with her in her research, you know?
So she's kind of the leader in ecology and evolutionary biology with the study of mutualisms.
What is mutualism?
So mutualisms are species interactions where both organisms benefit. So think like pollination. So you have a plant that makes a flower and a bee that comes over and pollinates it. Both of those organisms benefit because the bee gets nectar and pollen that it eats, and the plant gets pollinated and makes seeds. So there's this kind of exchange for resources for services, and wherein they both benefit.
That's awesome. Okay. And your story was pretty meandering to get to where it was. Have you encountered any obstacles along that path that you kind of had to overcome? Have you had to deal with any uncertainty as you become now a graduate student?
I think applying to grad schools was one of the most stressful periods of my entire life.
Oh no.
Because I was told that I should apply to 8, which did not happen. And applying to grad school is very expensive.
Yes.
And each school, the cheapest was $80, and the most expensive was UCLA for $150. And so I applied to 4 different ones and probably ended up spending probably over $300 to do it.
And is that for primaries or secondaries or?
Oh, what do you mean?
Oh, so there are some schools that have a primary application that you submit, and then they'll sometimes send you a secondary application that you also then have to pay for.
I did not notice any of those things. I think that's more common in medical
and
schools.
Dental. I was unsure if it transferred to grad.
No, not usually in grad school. There's just the one application, but they will, if you don't make it in, they still keep your money. So. But it involved a lot of cold emails, and I even actually made kind of a template where I'd be like, "Hello, Dr. Blank, I'm Alex Karnish. Things I'm interested in," and then I had a little section where it was like, "I saw your work blank, and I was interested in blank, and I think we could do blank," and then I would wrap it up with some other statistics about myself. And so I still have it on my laptop.
You should send that to us so that way we can give it to the people.
Oh yeah, I definitely will.
To grad school.
I always give it to people. So I did a lot of that, and then so I am a young queer scientist.
Yeah.
So going into new environments, so interviewing for grad school is kind of nerve-wracking at times because they'll fly you out there, but once you're there, you're there, and so. If things go badly, there's not an easy way out. And thankfully in ecology and evolutionary biology, generally pretty inviting environments where there's at least, usually it's the whole department, but there's usually a couple people that are pretty good. But it's always nerve-wracking to come into those new environments, not knowing who you're going to run into, what people are going to say. Which has definitely been probably one of those barriers to getting into science, the uncertainty.
It's definitely that. When we were first setting up this series and everything, we talked about how you do have to send those cold emails to people. You do have to just go through and put yourself out there and see scientists as with Dr. Bronstein when you had the dinner with her. She's just another person, you know? But it's hard to get to a point, especially when you were an undergrad who was I've not had a lot of professional experience in this area, and now I'm just in Arizona that I've never been before, you know? It's really interesting that you focused on that aspect of when you are transitioning from the undergrad to the graduate, that it's not just here's a completely different set of expectations from school, but here's a completely different environment as well in most cases.
Exactly. So an interesting thing, so at Iowa State, it's pretty much an even split in the faculty, men, women, 50-50. And when you go to these different schools, you kind of realize how different departments can be in that measurement.
Yeah, there are certain areas where it's oh, there's not this many people here. Yeah. That's totally fine.
Sometimes it's how it shakes out. Sometimes it can be an indicator of some broader issue. You just don't know when you walk in.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to be a little detective and be okay, so why are there no women here?
Why are there no people here? What's going on? So we've talked a lot about your work with Dr. Bronstein and mutualism. What is it specifically that you are focusing on within her lab?
So I am kind of looking at mutualisms and specifically how organisms, and specifically within that plants, split up their different resources to different mutualisms or like growth and defense.
Okay.
So with plants, it'd be like, oh, how much are they, when they have a limited amount of resources, how much goes into making flowers to be pollinated, how much of it goes into fruits to get their seeds moved somewhere.
Yeah.
So stuff like that.
Okay. And is there anything else inside of the lab that you're working on, or is that like your main focus? I know that you had said that when you were an undergrad, you had a postgrad that you were working with. Are you working with any undergrads in the lab right now, or?
Currently no, just because the pandemic has kind of limited my interaction with students, and then for a while it was kind of uncertain how undergraduate research would work.
Okay.
But I have in the past. Another aspect of my research is how those other organisms are affected by changes in a resource allocation or distribution to mutualism. So like, how do the moths react to flowers changing? Or how do, the plant I study, Datura, its seeds are actually moved around by ants.
Okay.
And so how do the ants react to different resource allocation to dispersal?
Okay.
So I've had students looking at the seeds or at how ants respond to them.
Yeah.
When I first started, I had a couple students working on the barrel cactus, because they have some interesting seed stuff going on.
I love barrel cacti. They're so fun.
So it's just kind of like these little projects that kind of feed into my own research, but I think have enough room for someone to make it their own project.
Yeah.
I actually had someone do their, maybe not an honors thesis, but something for EEV that was similar
Like
to
a capstone.
yeah,
kind of.
capstone project, where she went through my seeds and saw whether or not seeds from plants that got fewer resources germinated differently. So
Okay.
it's something related to mine, but kind of far enough, like removed enough to where it can become someone's own project.
Okay, that's awesome. And then kind of outside that work with STEM, you had mentioned that you are a queer young researcher. Have you found a community here in Tucson?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Wonderful.
Tucson's a great city, and my department is pretty great, and the grad community is really good.
Wonderful.
So plenty of friends.
And then are there any other passions or communities that you are a part of outside of STEM that keep you motivated, that keep you going, kind of things?
So I play a lot of tabletop role-playing games, including Dungeons and Dragons.
Excited about this part.
And so I run the game for my friends.
So you're the DM?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm the DM, and then I run a couple different games. So I like playing like Dungeons and Dragons, or maybe Call of Cthulhu if we want to do something more horror-based.
Yeah.
So we run a bunch of different games, and I actually had some stuff published in a little supplement, fan-made supplement, for one of the D&D books, Wild Beyond the Witchlight, where I wrote some adventures and some. The idea was that we'd be making attractions for the carnival that's in that D&D book, and so I have a couple attractions that went up to.
What were some of the attractions?
One was a mountain hag had an anatomy exhibit.
That's
where
fun.
like the like eyes would move, like you weren't sure if they were completely conscious or not.
Are you conscious in there, or are you just kind of
Yeah.
like,
It actually ended up being the cover of the supplement, like they illustrated it.
Really?
It was really fun.
Gosh, that's so cool. We have to find a photo of that.
Oh yeah, I can send one at the
Please,
end.
that'll be so good. Oh my gosh. My parents grew up playing D&D and Magic the Gathering and everything, so I've been like surrounded by it on the periphery. So in true D&D fashion, which is your favorite edition to play?
I play 5th edition. I got started in 3.5. 4th edition has its merits, but I did not find it fun to play whatsoever.
Yeah, unless you were a Magic user in 4th edition, it was not really the best. Yeah. I've played 3.5 because that's what I did when I was like tiny and was like, I also want to play D&D because mom and dad are doing it. And then once I got older, I tried 5th edition and it was more fun, you know?
It's more streamlined.
Yeah.
There's not as much math. It's
Yay, math.
I'm nothing against math, but
sometimes you don't want to do it.
to dig into the weeds, 3.5 had 30 plus skills that each had their own numbers, and it was just a lot of calculating.
Yep.
And you'd be like, I'm really bad at climbing, but I'm really good at swimming. Whereas now it's like, if you're athletic, you're just athletic. Like, you're generally good at things. You don't need to be different.
So you've got high strength, you can do this. You've got good dexterity, go for this.
Yeah.
You know? I play more like one-shot tabletop games. I don't know if you've ever heard of You Awaken in a Strange Place.
I have heard of it.
I love that game. I love it because it's so creative in like the people at the session come up with the skills. And so I had one where one of the skills was like yodeling, and the DM had to just find a way to do a yodeling check on someone. It's so fun to see the situations that people get in with those kinds of things. Okay, and this is our very last question. Thank you so much for talking with us and everything. But what is one piece of advice that you would give to your 16-year-old self? And what is one piece of advice that you would give somebody who is going into research or applying into grad school?
So for my 16-year-old self, I'd probably just say, go with your plan. It's going to be okay. You can just keep going. And kind of more general advice is always like, you're young. You can always change your mind. I was very, my 16-year-old self, I'm pretty much on the track that I thought it was going to be when I graduated high school. So it's kind of like, way to go, we did it. But it is important to always know that, like, you can always change your mind. You can always do something else.
Yeah.
For grad school, if you're going, this is going to be very serious. If you're going into a science grad program, make sure they pay you. Yes. You should not be paying for tuition. Yes. They should be giving you a stipend. How much that stipend is depends on the school, and that's a whole other issue. But you should not be paying tuition, and they should be paying you to do your research.
Yes. Even
if you have to TA, TAing is fun and fulfilling.
You get to teach people and interact with them. It's fun.
It's one of the best parts of being a grad student, I think, because it's like something to do consistently in the week where you get to interact with people. So that's my biggest piece of advice. And just don't be afraid to cold email. Lots of people get these emails, and if they don't respond, then maybe you don't want to be with them.
Yeah, or you can hit them up with a double email. I get that it's like a little anxiety producing to do a double email, but like they'll either reply to you or they won't, and they won't care that you double emailed them.
Yeah, they get a ton of emails every day. I know people that would probably benefit from getting 2 emails.
Be like, per my last email, did you see this?
Yeah, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
All right, thank you so much for coming and talking with us, and thank you everybody out there for watching this episode and listening. This has been Reaching for Research by Students for Students, and we will see you next time.